I received a $3.2 million retirement package after 30 years with Morrison Engineering. I grabbed my briefcase, my company award plaque, and rushed home 2 hours early to surprise my wife. When I walked through our front door, I heard her voice from upstairs. She was on the phone saying, "Don't worry, once the divorce is final, we'll have at least half of that. Maybe more if his lawyer is incompetent." I froze at the bottom of our oak staircase. The same staircase where we'd taken Christmas photos for nearly 3 decades. The same staircase where I'd once carried her over the threshold when we first bought this house. My hand tightened around the handle of my briefcase. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stood there, listening to my future being divided into percentages. "Does he know yet?" she asked. A pause. "No. He doesn't even know I know," she said quietly. "I just need to keep things normal for a few weeks. Timing matters. And he still trusts the wrong people, the wrong people." That line didn't land right. It hung in the air longer than the rest of the conversation. I didn't fully understand it, but I felt it settle somewhere deep in my gut like a warning I'd missed too many times before. I set my briefcase down on the tile as gently as possible. I stepped backward, one slow step at a time, until I was outside again. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a sound. I walked to my car like a man who'd just realized the ground beneath his house had been hollow for years. Inside the car, I stared at the steering wheel. 30 years of work. 28 years of marriage. And somehow the most dangerous part wasn't the divorce she was planning, it was how confident she sounded. Not angry, not emotional, organized. I drove to a coffee shop a few miles away and sat in the corner with a cup of coffee that went cold in my hands. My thoughts didn't race. They slowed. They sharpened. I replayed her exact words again and again. He still trusts the wrong people. That meant she hadn't just found out about the retirement package by accident. She'd expected it. Planned around it. Known enough to coordinate timing. But here's the problem. The official numbers hadn't even been released yet. Not publicly. Not internally beyond a very small circle. Which meant someone had told her early. Someone with access. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Dave from IT. We'd worked together for years, reliable, careful. The kind of man who didn't ask questions unless they mattered. He answered on the second ring. "Rob. Everything okay?" I kept my voice level. "I need to ask you something. Off the record. Who can access retirement package files before they're announced?" Silence on the line. Then a slow exhale. "Rob, that's a small list," he said carefully. "Why?" I looked out the coffee shop window at the late afternoon traffic moving past like nothing in the world had changed. "Because," I said quietly, "someone knew about mine before they were supposed to. And I think this started a lot earlier than today." Dave didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice had shifted lower. More cautious. "Rob, your file wasn't just viewed," he said. "It was flagged last week." I felt something inside my chest go very still. "Flag?" I asked. Another pause. "Yeah," he said. "And not for the reason you'd expect." I didn't move for a long moment, just sat there, staring out the coffee shop window at cars sliding past like nothing had happened. My retirement package, $3.2 million after 30 years of work, wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. It had become the center of a carefully laid plan, and I was the unwitting target. "Flagged," I repeated, my voice tighter this time. "Yes," Dave said cautiously, "someone in HR accessed your file multiple times last week. Not just viewing it was downloaded, forwarded, and opened outside our system. External email Rob. Outside the company, the coffee I'd been holding suddenly felt like lead in my hands. Who I asked. I mean it's sensitive. Rob, but it's Margaret Shen, HR Margaret, 5 years at the company. Polite professional, never the type to take risks, at least, that's what I thought. She sent it to someone outside. Dave exhaled. Yes, an email address I don't recognize. But it looks like a financial consultant, very specific about divorce. Asset planning, the works. I leaned back in the chair, letting the words sink in. My wife wasn't just talking about half of my retirement package on a whim. She'd coordinated it. Someone had helped her, an expert, and my own company had inadvertently delivered the blueprint. Do you have a copy of the headers? I asked. Yes, he said. I can send them to you, but you need to be careful, Rob. If anyone finds out you're investigating, HR could claim you're breaching policy. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Send it quietly. I want everything. I hung up and stared at the cup in front of me. The steam had long since disappeared. The world around me felt muted, like someone had turned down the volume and left me alone with the truth. I replayed my wife's voice from the staircase. Every inflection, every pause, suddenly loaded with intent. She hadn't just overheard something. She had acted, planned, coordinated. And if she'd been working with someone like this consultant, there was no telling what she'd uncovered or what she was already setting in motion. I had to think carefully. One wrong move, one word spoken too early, and the entire package could be in her hands before I even had a chance to react. My mind drifted to possibilities: legal loopholes, protective trusts, surveillance, evidence, but each option came with its own danger. And then the thought hit me like ice. She didn't know I'd heard her yet. Not a single hint that I was aware. That meant I had a window. A small, quiet window to act before she could adjust, to plan. To protect myself. I folded my hands on the table and breathed slowly. Patience, observation, strategy. I wasn't going to rush. I wasn't going to confront. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed clarity. I needed leverage, and I was going to get it. Because if she thought she could quietly steal 3 decades of work from me, she was about to learn that timing could work both ways. I left the coffee shop without finishing my drink. The air outside felt sharp, the late afternoon sun already low. My hands were still shaking, though my face betrayed nothing. I had a plan forming, even if it was only fragments for now. One thing was certain. I couldn't go home and act normal without a strategy. Not when someone had been quietly trying to dismantle everything I'd built. I drove to a quiet law office on the other side of town, a place I'd never been, 30 minutes from anywhere familiar. The receptionist looked at me like I was a man carrying bad news. Which in a way, I was. Her name was Patricia Morrison, no relation to my company. Just an attorney specializing in high asset cases. I found her online the night before, after a restless search that kept landing on stories of couples losing everything because of one misstep. Patricia was in her mid-50s, sharp eyes, precise movements, and a presence that made you feel immediately measured. I told her everything, every word I'd heard, every detail about my retirement package, every suspicious HR action. I watched her face as I spoke. No shock, no anger, only calculation. Mr. Mitchell, she said finally, leaning back in her chair, your situation is delicate, very delicate. But it also gives you options. I swallowed. Options, meaning she exhaled slowly first. Your wife doesn't know you know yet. That's critical. Second, the HR employee who forwarded your information potentially committed a federal privacy violation. That alone is leverage. Third, if this financial consultant she has been working with is coaching her on asset extraction before a divorce, and we can prove coordination, that could shift the balance entirely. And fourth, your retirement package hasn't officially transferred yet. You have a 30-day window to secure it legally. Her words landed like stones in a pond, each one rippling farther than the last. So what do? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even as adrenaline pumped through my veins. Patricia's lips curved slightly, not in warmth, but in satisfaction, the kind of satisfaction someone feels when they've found a winning strategy. You play along, you act normal. You gather evidence, you don't confront, and when the time comes, you protect every dollar. Legally and decisively, if she suspects, even for a second. She'll cover her tracks. You cannot let that happen. I nodded, though my stomach churned. It was going to be a long, careful game. Every smile, every casual conversation at home, every mundane gesture, it was all a cover. Patricia handed me a small checklist. Document everything. Install monitoring where legal. Hire a private investigator to track her communications and meetings. Everything had to be discreet. I left her office and drove home slowly, thinking about the staircase, about her voice, about the casual way she had planned to take what was mine. She thought she was clever. That night, I walked through my front door and saw her in the kitchen, humming like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me. "You're home late," she said. I smiled back, perfectly calm. "Traffic," I said. She nodded, oblivious, and that was exactly how it had to be, because she had no idea I was already 2 steps ahead. That night, I slept beside my wife and didn't sleep at all. She lay on her side of the bed scrolling through her phone, the glow lighting her face in soft blue. Every so often she'd smile faintly at something on the screen, then turn it off when she noticed me looking. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small adjustments, small silences. The kind you only notice when you're finally paying attention. I kept my breathing steady, even, calm. Patricia's words echoed in my mind. Act normal. Don't confront. Gather evidence. So I did what I'd done for decades. I played the role of husband. The next morning, I made coffee. She kissed my cheek, asked about my plans for the day. I told her I had a few final meetings before retirement wrapped officially. She nodded, warm and supportive. If I hadn't heard that phone call, I would have believed every word. That was the unsettling part. She wasn't acting guilty, she was acting prepared. I left the house and drove straight to meet the private investigator Patricia recommended. His name was Marcus Shaw, former detective, late 50s, calm eyes, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I gave him Linda's photo, her schedule, the name of the financial consultant Dave had traced from the forwarded email. Marcus didn't react much, just wrote things down carefully. "You want surveillance?" he asked. "Yes," I said, discreet. "No confrontation, just patterns meetings." "Anything out of the ordinary?" He nodded. "You'd be surprised how ordinary most affairs look from the outside. Grocery stores, coffee shops, parking lots. It's never as dramatic as people imagine." "I'm not looking for drama," I said quietly. "I'm looking for the truth." Marcus met my eyes for a moment, then closed the folder. "You'll have it." I drove home afterward and forced myself into routine, lunch together, small talk. She asked if I'd thought more about what we might do once I retired, travel, maybe, a smaller house someday. She spoke like someone mapping out a future. I listened like someone taking notes. Later that evening, she stepped outside to take a call. Said the reception inside was bad. I watched through the kitchen window as she paced slowly across the patio, voice low, posture tense. She laughed once, then stopped quickly, as if remembering herself, when she came back inside. She smiled like nothing had happened. Just my sister, she said. I nodded, of course, but something about the timing didn't sit right. The way she checked the clock before making the call. The way she'd mentioned timing matters on the staircase. The way Dave said my file had been flagged even before I signed the final paperwork. This wasn't spontaneous. It had started earlier than I realized, maybe weeks, maybe months. That night, I sat alone in my home office and opened my laptop. Dave had sent the email header information. One external address kept appearing. Forwarded documents, opened multiple times, timestamps aligning almost perfectly with Linda's recent schedule changes. I stared at the name attached to the domain. I'd expected a stranger, a random consultant instead. It was someone I'd met before, not socially, not closely, but enough to recognize the name. And enough to realize this situation wasn't just a marriage falling apart. It was coordinated, carefully, quietly, and it had likely been happening long before I ever came home early that day. I closed the laptop slowly. If I was right about who else was involved, then this wasn't going to end with a simple divorce. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was angry. Anger is loud, hot, immediate. What I felt was colder than that, quieter. The kind of clarity that settles in when denial finally steps aside. The name in that email header stayed in my mind like a splinter. Daniel Reeves, not a stranger, not exactly a friend either. He'd been around for years on the edges of company events, consulting occasionally on retirement transitions. Sometimes brought in for executive planning sessions. Smooth voice. Perfect posture. The kind of man who made a living telling people where their money should go and when. I'd met him twice. Maybe 3 times. He'd shaken my hand once at a company dinner. Told me I'd done well for myself. I hadn't thought about him since, until now. Because if Dave's information was right, my retirement file hadn't just been forwarded randomly. It had been sent directly to someone who specialized in restructuring assets during divorce proceedings, someone who knew exactly how to time filings, how to position claims, how to guide a spouse through maximizing a settlement. And if he'd been talking to Linda, then this hadn't started recently. It had been building. The next morning, I met Marcus again. He slid a thin envelope across the table without ceremony. Preliminary observations. He said, nothing dramatic yet, but patterns are forming. Inside were time-stamped photos. Linda leaving the gym earlier than usual, meeting someone at a cafe across town. Sitting across from a man whose face was partially turned away from the camera but unmistakably familiar. Daniel Reeves. There it was, quiet, ordinary. A meeting that looked harmless to anyone who didn't know what they were seeing. 2 adults having coffee, talking, planning. How long? I asked. First confirmed meeting about 5 weeks ago, Marcus said. Possibly earlier. They're careful. No obvious physical contact in public. This looks professional, structured, professional. That word settled heavily in my chest. So not just an affair, I said. Marcus shook his head. Slightly. If it is, they're very disciplined about hiding it, but honestly, this looks more like strategy sessions, financial, legal. Pre-divorce planning. She brings a folder sometimes. He brings a laptop. I sat back in my chair and stared at the photographs again. 5 weeks. At least. Which meant when she stood on that staircase talking about timing, she wasn't reacting to my retirement. She was anticipating it. She doesn't know you're aware, Marcus asked. No, I said. And she can't find out, he nodded. Then you have an advantage, but it won't last forever. Once that money transfers, whatever they're planning will move quickly. Exactly, that was the clock now, not days, not weeks, a countdown. I drove home afterward and found Linda in the kitchen. Flipping through a travel magazine, she looked up and smiled. I was thinking, she said casually, once everything settles, maybe we should talk to a financial advisor, just to make sure we handle retirement the smart way. I met her eyes and smiled back. That's a good idea, I said, because now I knew something she didn't. The advisor she'd already chosen had just become the biggest mistake she'd make. For the next few days, I kept to the rhythm of normal life, and she never suspected a thing. I made coffee, went through my routine, even helped her with small chores around the house. Each laugh, each casual comment, every fleeting touch, it was all performance. A mask I wore better than anyone could have imagined. But behind that mask, my mind was running on fast forward. Every meeting Marcus reported, every photograph of Linda and Daniel Reeves, every detail about her increasingly meticulous planning was logged, analyzed, and stored. Every small misstep she made, every sign of her overconfidence became another piece of the puzzle. Then one evening, I got a call from Marcus. Mr. Mitchell, he said. His voice had that calm, professional tone that always made the words feel heavier than they were. I've got something new. You need to see this. I drove straight to his office and sighed. Marcus handed me a manila envelope. Inside were photographs and documents that made my chest tighten. Linda and Daniel, meeting at a downtown law office. Documents spread across the table. She was pointing at graphs, taking notes, and at one point, I saw her glance over her shoulder just like she had on the staircase, confident that no one was watching. This isn't just casual planning, Marcus said quietly. She's been creating a roadmap, retirement package, savings, house equity, even small investments. She's got it all mapped, every asset, every account. And Reeves, he's coaching her on timing, wording, even which accounts to access first if the divorce is filed. I exhaled slowly. Every instinct in me told me to explode, to storm into that office, demand answers, confront her. But I remembered Patricia's voice, patience, observation, evidence. You said there were more meetings, I asked. Marcus nodded. 3 more confirmed, last week alone. They're very careful, private cafes, secluded parking lots. But this, he said, tapping the envelope, this is the pattern, professional, deliberate, calculated. I sat back and ran my hands over my face. 5 weeks, she had been planning this for at least 5 weeks. All the signs I'd ignored, late gym sessions, her new routines, the password on her phone, they were all pieces of a strategy she thought I'd never notice. And yet I had noticed. I left Marcus's office with a strange mixture of anger and calm. Anger at her betrayal, yes, but also a quiet satisfaction. I had information she didn't know I had. I had time she didn't know I could use. That night, back home, she mentioned travel again. We could start looking at Italy, she said over wine. Rome, Florence, You've always wanted to go, I nodded. We'll plan it, she smiled, completely unaware. Because while she thought she was mapping her victory, I was already mapping mine. And I realized something chilling. The more confident she got, the easier she would be to catch. The question now wasn't if I would act, it was how, and the clock was ticking. The house had never felt quieter, not empty, just staged, like every room was waiting for something to happen for the next week. I followed Patricia's instructions with almost mechanical precision, smile when appropriate. Engage in routine conversations. Don't withdraw. Don't accuse. Don't change patterns too quickly. The goal wasn't confrontation, the goal was timing. Timing was everything now. Marcus continued his surveillance. Each day he sent small updates. Nothing dramatic on the surface. Coffee meetings, short drives, one afternoon appointment at a financial office downtown. The same office Daniel Reeves used when he wanted privacy away from his main practice. Every meeting had a pattern, late morning or early afternoon, never evenings, never weekends. Always when I was expected to be busy or out of the house, which meant they were planning around my schedule. That realization didn't make me angry anymore. It made me careful. One afternoon, Patricia called me into her office again. She had a folder open, documents neatly stacked, notes marked with colored tabs. She looked up as I sat down. We're moving into the preparation phase, she said. Your retirement package transfer date is confirmed. 12 days from now. 12 days. The number settled heavily in my mind. Not long. But enough. Once the funds hit, she continued. We have a short window to move them into a protected structure. Completely legal. Completely secure. But we only get one clean opportunity before any divorce filing complicates things. I nodded. She's planning to file soon. Patricia didn't look surprised. Most likely, and she'll want to file after confirming the funds are accessible. That's standard in coordinated asset divorces, which means she's waiting for the money to land, waiting for confirmation, waiting for the moment she believes she has leverage. Patricia slid a document toward me. There's one more thing, the HR leak. We're still gathering proof. But if we confirm coordination between Reeves and the employee who accessed your file, that becomes significant, not just for leverage, legally significant. I studied the document. You think it was intentional? I think, she said carefully, that someone helped her know about your package earlier than they should have. Whether that help was paid for, pressured, or personal, we'll find out. I left her office with a quiet sense of focus. The pieces were lining up, slowly, precisely. No sudden moves, no dramatic gestures, just preparation. That evening, Linda made dinner. She asked if I'd thought about consolidating some accounts once the retirement funds arrived. Said it might be easier to manage things together. Her tone was gentle. Practical. I nodded thoughtfully. We'll look at everything once it clears. She smiled, satisfied. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing the timeline Patricia had created. Every step mapped. Every move accounted for. A strategy built on patience instead of reaction. For the first time since that afternoon on the staircase, I didn't feel shocked. I felt ready. Because in 12 days, the money would land. And when it did, the game they thought they were playing was going to change completely. Day 9. The countdown had a rhythm now. Every morning felt like a step closer to something none of them realized was already shifting beneath their feet. Marcus called just after noon. I think you'll want to hear this one live, he said quietly. They met again today. Same cafe. Same table. I didn't speak. I just listened. Conversation was brief, he continued, but clear. They're waiting for confirmation of your fund transfer. Daniel mentioned a window and a filing timeline. Linda asked if everything was still set for the week after. So that was the plan: wait for the money, confirm access, file immediately after. A clean move. Clinical, efficient. The kind of strategy you'd expect from someone who did this for a living. Marcus hesitated before adding, "There's something else." He handed her a document envelope when they left. She didn't open it there, but based on size and labeling. "Likely draft filings or asset worksheets." "Thank you," I said quietly. "Keep tracking but stay invisible always," he replied. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment, letting the information settle. No spike of anger, no rush of adrenaline, just clarity. They weren't improvising, they had a schedule, which meant we could plan around it. That evening, Linda brought up finances again over dinner. Casual, almost rehearsed. "I was thinking," she said lightly, "once your retirement clears, maybe we should talk to someone about long-term planning. Consolidating things, making sure everything's protected." The word hung in the air. I gave a small nod. "That makes sense. We'll go over it together." She smiled, relieved, reassured. And for a brief second, I saw something in her expression that wasn't calculation. It was tension, like she was holding her breath for something to arrive, waiting for confirmation that all the pieces she'd set in motion were about to pay off. I wondered if she felt even a flicker of doubt, or if she believed this was already finished. 2 days later, Patricia called. "Funds are scheduled to post on the morning of the 12th, she said. "Once they hit, we move immediately. Transfers, account restructuring, asset shielding. Everything happens within hours, clean, legal, irreversible." "And if they file?" I asked. "They can file all they want," she replied calmly. "But they'll be filing against a reality that looks very different from what they expect." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. 12 days had felt long at first. Now it felt like a fuse burning down. Later that night, I noticed Linda on her phone in the kitchen, speaking in a low voice. She stopped when she saw me. Smiled. Asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. We stood there together in the quiet kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil. 2 people in the same room. 2 entirely different timelines unfolding under the same roof. And somewhere in the middle of that silence, I realized something important. They thought the money was the end game, the moment everything shifted in their favor. But for me, it was just the beginning, because in 3 days, the funds would land, and when they did, the move they'd been waiting months to make wasn't going to work the way they planned. The morning of the 12th day arrived like any other, but the weight in the air was different. Even the sunlight seemed sharper, as if highlighting the tension that had been building for weeks. I got up early, brewed coffee, and dressed carefully, not in a rush, not too formal. Just enough to appear normal. Every small detail mattered now. Patricia had emphasized it countless times. Appear ordinary, conceal strategy, avoid suspicion. I checked my phone. The transfer was scheduled for 9:15 a.m. Exactly. I watched the clock tick, heart steady. Mind sharp. Months of patience, careful observation, and preparation were about to pay off or collapse if I made a single misstep. Linda stirred, making her way into the kitchen. She hummed, casual, bright, completely unaware of how much I knew, how much I had seen, how long I had waited. "Good morning," she said. pouring herself a cup of coffee. Big day, huh? Retirement officially posts today. Exciting, I nodded slowly. Yeah. Exciting, I said, kept my tone measured, calm, normal. I added, almost as an afterthought, do you want some tea? She smiled, shook her head, and took her coffee to the living room. I watched her go, her movements casual. Unaware she was stepping into a carefully orchestrated trap she didn't even see coming. At 9:15 a.m., I watched my phone screen light up. The $3.2 million appeared in my account. Signed, verified, irreversible in just a few clicks thanks to the trust Patricia had prepared. A short time later, Patricia confirmed the transfer was complete. Robert, she said calmly over the phone. Everything is secured, the trust is active, the funds are untouchable by anyone else. You are fully protected. I exhaled slowly. Relief, satisfaction, a quiet sense of justice all mixed together in a calm, steady pulse. I waited 2 more hours before making any move. The house remained as she had left it, normal, serene, unsuspecting. Then, around 11 a.m., Marcus's colleague delivered the divorce papers to our front door. Linda had no warning, not a single clue. The look on her face when she opened the envelope and read the first page, Marcus had captured it perfectly. Shock, disbelief, immediate recalculation. She called Daniel Reeves almost immediately. The conversation was clipped, urgent, full of words like timing, window, unforeseen. He sounded calm on the other end. But she was rattled. They hadn't anticipated the trust, the protections, the evidence I had gathered, the control they thought they had, evaporated in hours. Patricia played me the voicemail from Reeves's office. Confusion, concern, this isn't what we expected, he said, and for the first time, I felt a quiet, controlled satisfaction, not gloating, not revenge for its own sake, but the satisfaction that comes from seeing justice arrive not as a scream, but as a quiet, inevitable consequence. That night, Linda returned from a meeting with her lawyer. She didn't speak, just signed the remaining paperwork with her eyes lowered, a shadow of the confident, calculating person she'd been only a few days before. And when she left, Marcus and Patricia finally let me exhale fully. I had my retirement, my peace, and the satisfaction of knowing the betrayal, the conspiracy, the months of planning against me all neutralized by patience, evidence, and careful strategy. But even as I sat alone in the quiet house, I realized one thing: the money had been saved. Yes, but what I had truly won was control of my life, my choices, my future. And no one, not her, not Reeves, not anyone else could take that away. Linda was gone by noon the next day, her bags packed, her car loaded, and the look on her face was one of someone defeated yet still unwilling to fully acknowledge it. Daniel Reeves had disappeared from the picture entirely once he realized the legal consequences of his involvement. The HR employee, Margaret Chen, had been fired and faced investigation for the privacy violations. Justice in its quiet, methodical way had arrived. I walked through the house one last time. The walls still held echoes of 28 years of memories, Christmas mornings on the oak staircase, birthdays, family dinners, but now they were just echoes. I didn't linger. I didn't feel rage or grief, only clarity. The house sold for $920,000. I walked away with my portion, my 401k, and my retirement package safely locked in the trust. Linda got her share, disappeared to Florida with her sister, and began her new life. I began mine. I bought a smaller house in the mountains of Virginia, 3 bedrooms, a workshop, and a view that stretched for miles. Days were mine to fill however I chose. Woodworking. Hiking. Volunteering at the local veterans center. I reconnected with my children, explaining the truth with honesty and patience. They were hurt, yes, but they understood. They had seen the distance, the subtle cracks, and now they saw how careful planning and patience could protect what was theirs. Months later, Dave called from IT. Margaret Chen had tried to sue for wrongful termination. The case was thrown out. Reeves had been investigated by the State Financial Board. 2 other women had come forward with similar stories. He'd lost his license. I thanked Dave, hung up, and sat quietly on the porch of my mountain home, watching the sunset. I didn't feel triumph or gloating. Just a steady, deep satisfaction. I had my life back, my security, my dignity. Some nights, I still think about Linda, about the life we had, about the love that once existed, about the dreams that slipped away, but mostly, I think about how close I came to losing everything and how one overheard conversation changed everything. The best revenge, I've learned, isn't shouting, it isn't public humiliation, it isn't traumatic confrontation. The best revenge is patience, strategy, protecting yourself, securing your future, walking away with your dignity intact and letting the consequences unfold quietly around those who tried to deceive you. I won my retirement. I won my freedom. And I won the knowledge that I could rebuild, on my own terms, a life worth living. Sometimes I sit on the porch at sunset, think about the oak staircase in the old house, the Christmas photos, the dreams we had, and then I look at my workshop, the mountains, and the valley below. And I smile. Because this life is mine. And nothing, and no one, can take that away. So that's my story. 28 years of marriage, a lifetime of work, and one overheard conversation that changed everything. I didn't shout, I didn't rage, I didn't confront, I waited. I watched, and I acted with strategy. Betrayal can feel like a hurricane. Sudden and destructive, but patience, planning, and clarity can turn that storm into your advantage. I didn't just save my retirement, I reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this: when someone tries to take what's yours, the best revenge isn't chaos, it's protecting yourself, making smart choices, and letting justice, quiet, inevitable justice, do its work. So be careful, be patient, and remember, sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones you never shout about.